The headline version of baseball is for everyone. This isn't that. Streak Plot Scout goes below the surface. The 40-man decisions, the prospect ETAs, the draft implications hiding inside yesterday's transactions. Built for the people who understand that the game is won before it's played. Let's get into it. The most important number in Tomoyuki Sugano's 2026 scouting file is not his ERA. The ERA is 386. The most important number is the gap between that ERA and what the underlying contact quality says his ERA should be. And that gap sits at 366 runs, over 53 innings. That is not a fortunate month. That is structural unsustainability, and the scout's job is to explain exactly which tools are creating that gap and why they cannot hold it together through October. Start with the fastball, because the fastball is where the diagnosis begins on any starting pitcher. 92.1 miles per hour, down 0.6 from last season. That by itself is not disqualifying. Sugano has never been a velo-first pitcher. He has lived in the low 90s throughout his MLB tenure and generated outs through sequencing, deception, and command. But 0.6 of decline in a season is meaningful when the baseline is already 92. Below 92, the margins shrink considerably. At 91.5, hitters who are on the edge of being beat by the pitch timing are now on the comfortable side of that line. And the contact quality data confirms exactly that shift. Hard hit rate against at 47.6%. That is not a number a starting pitcher survives long-term. League average hard hit rate against for qualified starters runs in the 38 to 40% range. Sugano is sitting almost 8 points above that baseline. The barrel rate against at 16.3% is the more alarming figure. Barrels are the most predictive of home run and extra base hit outcomes, and 16.3 is significantly elevated. Average exit velocity against at 91.1 miles per hour. For context, 91 plus average exit velocity against is the level where you start projecting significant ERA inflation on any pitcher who doesn't have elite strikeout suppression as a counterweight. Sugano's strikeout rate at 4.7 per 9 is well below average. He is not missing bats at a rate that can absorb that contact quality. 9 home runs in 53 innings, 152 per 9. The barrel rate tells you those home runs are not bad luck. They are the direct output of the contact quality Sugano is giving up. And when you run the regression math forward, when strand rate normalizes, when sequencing luck evens out, an ERA in the 750 range is what the underlying data is projecting. The xERA at 752 is not an outlier estimate. It is a statistical projection based on contact quality, and the contact quality grades are legitimately bad. The chase rate at 25.3% is the diagnostic key to understanding how this happened. Chase rate is the single best indicator of whether a pitcher's stuff is generating deception and expansion in the zone. 25.3 is low. Hitters are staying disciplined against Sugano, taking pitches off the edges, forcing him to come into the zone, and then punishing him when he does. That is the behavioral profile of a hitter population that has identified and solved a pitcher. The fastball at 92.1 is no longer surprising anyone. The secondary pitches are not generating enough swing and miss to compensate. The result is a pitcher who is getting through innings on weak contact sequencing and strand luck, not on stuff-driven suppression. Now the career context, because the scout cannot evaluate a profile in a single-season vacuum. Sugano has historically outpaced his xERA, career average gap of -117, meaning his ERA runs about a run and a quarter better than the underlying metrics project. That is a real skill. It is partly command-based, partly deception-based, partly a function of how he sequences pitches and manages count leverage. A pitcher who consistently beats his xERA by a run plus over a career is not lucky. He has a legitimate skill that the contact quality metrics don't fully capture. But the current gap of -366 is 2.49 runs beyond even that career baseline. The skill is present. The skill cannot account for 2.5 additional runs of positive variance. That variance will close. The grade breakdown on Sugano's current arsenal. Fastball grades at a 40 on present, below average velo, below average carry, generating hard contact at an unsustainable rate. Command grades at a 55. This is his carrying tool, and the whip at 123 and the BB/9 at 25 support a legitimate command grade. The secondary package, the splitter and the curveball, grades at a collective 50 on present, down from what would have been a 55 or 60 at his best. The deception component, which has been the multiplier on his command-based profile, grades at a 50. The overall arsenal grades at a present 45. A 45 is a below-average major league starter who can fill a rotation slot in a pinch, but cannot anchor innings for a contending organization. The closest comp at this stage of the profile degradation is Bartolo Colon, circa 2016 to 2017, not in terms of stuff type or delivery, but in terms of the dynamic at work. A veteran pitcher with exceptional command and deception who has had his fastball dip below the threshold where those secondary tools can fully compensate, resulting in a contact quality spike that the ERA hasn't yet reflected. Cologne held surface metrics together longer than the underlying data suggested he should, right up until he couldn't. Sugano is in the same dynamic window. The walk-year framing matters here for the scouting evaluation because it tells you something about competitive context. At 5.1 AAV on a walk year in Colorado, which is a rebuilding organization, there is no organizational incentive to manage this pitcher carefully. He will take the ball every fifth day, he will throw 95 pitches per start, he will accumulate innings that a more cautious staff might manage down. Colorado's luxury tax base at $109 million means replacement is financially viable, but the organization is not positioned to be selective with its rotation management right now. That workload context, 26-plus innings in the last 30 days, is consistent with a pitcher being used at full capacity without protective management. Floor projection for Sugano. The ERA normalizes toward 5.50 to 6.50 in the second half as strand luck regresses, home runs continue to accumulate against the elevated barrel rate, and the secondary stuff loses additional deception as hitters' bank starts against him. He finishes the season with an ERA in the 5 to 6 range, WAR at or below 0, and a walk-year case that is severely damaged. Ceiling. Some positive variance continues longer than projected. The ERA settles in the 4.50 to 5 range through June, and a contending team makes a trade inquiry in late June before the full regression arrives. That ceiling exists, and the Colorado context makes a trade scenario genuinely realistic. But the tools say the floor is where this is heading. The gap between ERA and xERA at 3.66 over 53 innings is too large, the contact quality is too real, and the fastball velocity trend is moving in the wrong direction. The scouting conclusion is straightforward. Tomoyuki Sugano grades at a 45 on present with a declining trajectory. The command is real, the career deception history is real, and neither is sufficient to sustain a 3.86 ERA against 47.6 hard hit rate and 16.3 barrel rate. The regression is not a question of if, it's a question of when the sequencing luck runs out, and 53 innings is already a long time to borrow against that kind of underlying contact quality. The tool that built Nathan Eovaldi's career is still there. 94.6 miles per hour on the fastball at 36 years old, 15 seasons in, is not nothing. But the pro scout's job is not to celebrate what remains. The job is to diagnose what's changed underneath the surface. And what's changed with the Eovaldi is structural, it's measurable, and it points in one direction. Start with the fastball, because that's always where you start with the Eovaldi. He was built on that pitch. Mid to upper 90s, late life, heavy enough to generate swing and miss. The velo is holding at 94.6, which is respectable for his age and his workload. But velo is only part of the equation. The question is what hitters are doing with it. And the answer this season is plenty. Hard hit rate against sitting at 44.2%. Average exit velocity against at 89.6 miles per hour. Barrel rate against at 7.7%. Those are not the numbers of a pitcher whose fastball is generating weak contact. Those are the numbers of a pitcher whose primary weapon has become predictable. Hitters are sitting on it, they're timing it, and when they get to it, they're squaring it up. The chase rate at 37.2% tells you he's still getting chasing on his secondary stuff, but contact quality when hitters do make contact has drifted into dangerous territory. Now look at the home run story, because that is the most important trend in Eovaldi's profile, and it has been building for years. Career average HR/9 of 110. This season, 166 on 10 home runs in 54 innings. That's not a blip, that's a continuation. The rate has been climbing incrementally over multiple seasons, which tells you this is not bad luck or a juiced ball or a bad month in a hitter's park. This is a contact quality problem that has been present and worsening. When you cross-reference that trend against the hard hit rates and exit velocities, the diagnosis sharpens. The fastball is losing its ability to prevent hard contact, and the home run rate is the downstream consequence. The ERA at 3.62 looks clean. The xERA at 4.12 is more honest. The FIP at 4.40 is closer to what the underlying data is projecting. The gap between ERA and xERA is 50 points. Not catastrophic, not enormous, but directionally telling. If you're evaluating Eovaldi's second half, you're leaning toward the 4.12 and the 4.40, not the 3.62. The ERA will drift toward the underlying metrics as the season progresses, because it always does. Now the workload context. 82 pitches per start average, 28 innings over the last 30 days. That is a managed arm. Texas is not stretching him. He's averaging roughly 5 2/3 innings per start, which tracks with 5 quality starts on the season. He's functional. He's durable by current standards. A 15-year veteran who stays in the rotation has value in that sense. But the pace puts him on track for significantly fewer than his career average of 117 innings per season. At this rate, you're looking at something in the range of 90 to 95 innings by October. That's a number 6 starter's workload in a number 3 starter's contract slot. The tool grades right now. Fastball grades out at a 55 on present, was touching 60 and above at his best. Command grades at a 55. He's still pitching with intention and execution. The location work is respectable. The secondaries, historically a cutter and a splitter that played off the fastball, are maintaining some effectiveness given that chase rate. Call those at 50 collectively. But the overall package grades at a 50 on present, maybe a 50 overall as a projection, accounting for the contact quality trend and the age curve. The comp that comes to mind is Kyle Gibson circa 2022 to 2023. Not identical, Gibson never had Eovaldi's pure velo, but the profile rhymes. A veteran right-hander holding surface metrics together through command and experience, while the underlying contact quality tells a progressively harder story. Gibson stayed functional as a back-end starter well past the point where scouts would have projected him out. Eovaldi may do the same. But Gibson was also never worth a second big contract after the tools began to slip, and neither is Eovaldi. Floor for Eovaldi going forward. A back-end rotation piece who logs 90 to 100 innings, posts an ERA in the 4 to 450 range, and keeps a team functional at the back of a rotation without being a competitive liability. He can do that. He's doing it right now at a lower efficiency than the ERA suggests. Ceiling from here. A return to the 370 range in ERA with some positive strand luck and a strong second half, which would maintain his market positioning as a veteran innings eater entering free agency. But the tools say the floor is more likely than the ceiling. The scouting conclusion on Nathan Eovaldi in May of 2026 is this: the arm is still working, the experience is real, and the command has not abandoned him. But the contact quality trend is not reversible at 36. The fastball is giving up hard contact at a rate that the ERA has not yet fully priced in. And the HR9 rate climbing over multiple years is the clearest signal in his entire profile. Hitters have found him, and the adjustments they've made are sticking. He grades as a present 50, a functional major league starter, a veteran asset. He does not grade as a $25 million pitcher. The tool story on Francisco Lindor is not defined by a strained calf. It's defined by what the StatCast data has been saying about his bat for 2 months before the calf put him on the shelf, and what that combination means for how this org has to think about the shortstop position going forward. Pre-injury line, WRC plus of 83, batting average at 226, 2 home runs, WAR at 0.3. Those are below average offensive production numbers from the highest paid position player in Mets franchise history. But the more important number is the ex-WOBA sitting at 340. That is not a disaster. 340 is functional. It projects toward a slightly above average offensive output if the hard contact starts converting. But it is also not the number of a star shortstop carrying a lineup. The hard hit rate at 43.2% and average exit velocity at 90.9 miles per hour suggests the quality of contact is present at a baseline level. The bat speed and the barrel approach have not completely eroded. But the surface results and the underlying peripherals are both telling you the same thing. Lindor is operating below what this contract demands right now. Now the calf. A strained calf on a 32-year-old shortstop, and Lindor turns 32 in November, is a grading challenge for a scout, because lower extremity soft tissue injuries have a habit of affecting lateral mobility before they affect anything you can measure at the plate. The 10-day IL designation is the minimum, and calf strains have a documented pattern of returning players who then re-aggravate within the first 2 weeks of return activity. The defensive profile at shortstop requires explosive lateral steps, and that is exactly the movement pattern that a calf strain disrupts. You do not need to catastrophize this injury, but you do not evaluate it in isolation. You stack it against an offensive profile that was already running below projection, and the picture that forms is of a player who may not return to the StatCast baseline he was at prior to the injury for another 4 to 6 weeks after activation. The defensive tools on Lindor have always been the floor of his value. The hands, the range to his left, the arm strength, historically grading at 65 on the arm, 60 on the range, with exceptional instincts that elevate the raw grades. But range at shortstop is the first tool that a calf strain attacks. If Lindor returns and the lateral range is compromised for even 2 weeks, you're looking at a player whose floor, which was his glove, is temporarily reduced at the same time his bat is underperforming. That is a compressed value window. Now the prospect story, because that is the more important long-term scouting conversation that this injury accelerates. Mitch Voigt is at A+ right now. Future value grade of 40. That's a fringe regular projection, not a star, but a legitimate organizational asset at a premium position. The hit tool grades at 45 on the 20/80 scale, which is below average but not a deal breaker at shortstop if the rest of the profile plays. The raw power grades at 55, which is above average and represents real upside at the position. The question on Voigt has always been the hit tool, whether the bat-to-ball approach can reach average or slightly above as he climbs levels, and a 45 hit tool on a 45 future value prospect means he's a player who needs reps at every level, not acceleration. The ETA of 2028 is the honest projection. Void at A+ in May of 2026 needs to prove himself at AA and AAA before anyone is credibly fast-tracking him to a contending roster's starting shortstop slot. The org ranks him 20th on their internal board with a medium-risk designation, which is the right framing. He's a real prospect, not a placeholder, but he is not a call-up candidate for a team sitting at 45.2 playoff odds. A Lindor injury does accelerate the evaluation conversation. The Mets will need to know sooner whether Voit can handle AA contact quality, but it does not change the tool projection. What this injury actually forces is a bridge solution at the big league level, and that bridge solution will be evaluated as a short-term roster construction decision, not a prospect development path. The org's farm system is ranked 7th. They have depth, but shortstop depth and starting shortstop quality are different grades. The comp for Voigt's current profile is a Trevor Story-type trajectory. Above-average raw power at shortstop, hit tool that needs to develop, strong arm, but at a significantly earlier stage and without Story's peak ceiling. The 45 future value grade means you're projecting a regular, not a star, and that's the honest evaluation. Floor on Lindor's return. A player who comes back in mid-June with compromised lateral range, takes another 3 weeks to get the lower half fully confident, and finishes the season in the WRC plus 90 to 100 range. Functional, below his contract value, but not damaging to the lineup in aggregate. Ceiling on return. The calf heals cleanly, the bat catches up with the ex-WOBA projection, and Lindor reasserts himself as a 110 WRC plus shortstop in the second half. The tools support the ceiling. The injury timeline and the current offensive indicators make the floor the more responsible projection. What to watch in the evaluation. The first 10 games after Lindor returns, specifically his lateral range on balls up the middle and into the hole, and whether the exit velocity on pulled contact climbs back toward the 93 to 94 range that represents his true tool level. If it does, the offensive profile will follow. If the calf is still affecting his lower half load, you'll see it in the ball flight before you see it in the box score. That's the read on the day. Same game, deeper read. Back tomorrow. This is Streak Plot Scout. Greatness is never random.